Greetings all, this is Hairy Nick, and today I was planning on making a tournament report for the Australia-New Zealand Team Championships that happened over last weekend, but hold the phone because we just got all the initial costings for X-Wing 2nd Edition, both pilot cards and upgrade cards, so I'm going to put that tournament report to one side, expect that in the next couple of days. But for the time being, we're going to take a look at all these costings because there's a lot to talk about, and I think it's good to try and get a gauge on where everyone is just at the start of this with this new information. Now, before we start on this, guys, in the comment section, lists. Let's get this going. Let's talk about lists. We'll start doing some list review videos in the next couple of days. Try to brew as best we can in 2nd edition with the limited knowledge we have right now. We don't have a meta, we don't have any tournament reports. So let's see what we can come up with in the meantime. And in the meantime, before X-Wing 2nd edition comes out, I will still be doing a few list review videos on 1st edition. The summer of Jank will continue. We'll have some 1st edition and 2nd edition stuff going at the same time, just for the next month or so. In the meantime, guys, let's have a look what we got here, because there's lots of really cool stuff. Now, this video is not going to be a comprehensive look through everything. I'm not going to compare everything to the old stuff. We've already gone through all the designs of all the new cards. I'm just going to scroll through these slowly, pick out all the interesting things, all the major changes. We will talk more about costings, particularly on how we curve pilots, how costing has affected initiative, that kind of stuff. That's all going to come in later videos. Today is just a bit of an initial look, and we'll start off with this page on the Rebel Alliance. Also, guys, I'm very sorry, but I'm going to have to do a lot of typing and clicking with my mouse while I do this. I usually try to edit this out, but because I have to keep cross-referencing all this information, I just can't avoid it in this video, so sorry about that. Also, one more thing. I'm going to be using the term relative costing a lot. That's because I don't want to have to talk about the 1st edition cost and say, oh, it actually relates to the 2nd edition cost. I'm not going to make that clarification every single pilot. It'll just make the video way too long. So when I say relative costing, I'm just doubling the 1st edition cost. That's all I'm doing, just so you guys are aware of that when you look at these cards and you think, hang on, that's not what the costing is. That's why I'm doing it. So let's start off with the ASF1 Ewing. Now, previously our most expensive pilot was 10 Num at a relative 62 points. Now 10 Num and Braylon are both 50 points. So this has had a massive point reduction. In fact, if we look at the low end of the spectrum, we have the Blue Squadron pilot. Previously was 44 points, now is 42 points. So a slight reduction there as well. And what we're seeing here is an adjustment to the curve of the pilots. From the low point to the high point, it's only an 8-point difference. In 1st edition, that only would have been 4 points. And what's going on here is some ships are getting less priority associated with initiative. In other words, you're not paying a super high amount for the ship to go to a higher initiative. Now, on more ace platforms like your Interceptor and your A-Wings, that's probably going to come more into it, but on the B-Wing, this has not happened. And as a result, we have a pretty good buy-in cost for 10 Num and Braylon, so that'll be cool. Let's move on to the ARC 170. Nora Wexley is our most expensive pilot at 55 points. Previously, a relative 58 points was our highest buy-in on the ARC 170. So again, a slight reduction. Braylon was our cheapest pilot previously, and he was a relative 50 points. So yes, that has stayed the same. Again, not a very high points cost associated with initiative. Now let's move on to the attack shuttle, and what's interesting here is we have a force user, and the ability to use the force has basically associated a very high points cost with it. So despite the fact that Ezra Bridger is not as high initiative as Harrison Dula, he is the most expensive. Now previously on the attack shuttle, our highest points value was Harrison Dula at a relative 44 points, and now Ezra has gone to 41 points. Indeed, if we compare Harrison Dula directly to her old self, she's gone down by 5 points. Which is good. A lot of these pilots didn't really see him play. We go to the low end of the spectrum with Zeb Aurelius. He was previously 36 points, down to 34. So a slight reduction across the board there. The Azatec gunship has also had a very nice points reduction. If we bring up the old Wolf Warrior, we can see he was a relative 60 points. 56 points, basically across the board. This has gone down by a few points, including Lowrick, but Lowrick has had a nerf to his design. He now no longer provides evade results on the fly. He gives evade tokens at the start of one of your friendly ship's defenses, which is nowhere near as good. However, it does enable Juke. That is something to take note of, but overall not as applicable as he once was. Let's move on to the Y-Wing, and previously our most expensive pilot was Horton Salm at 50 points. Now we have Nora Wexley sitting in the top spot at 43 points, so a pretty big reduction there with Nora Wexley. Also, our low point was the Gold Squadron Pilot, which was 36 points. And our low point now is the Grey Squadron Bomber at 32 points. So again, a pretty decent reduction there. Plus talents. We have talents on the Y-Wing now on both the Scum and Rebel faction, which is really, really cool to see. I like a lot of these designs, actually. In terms of faction identity, the Y-Wing in particular, because it's a platform that is shared on both the Rebel and the Scum factions, those platforms seem to me to be things that really push us in certain directions. I made a video on that the other day, talking about needing to be close to your friendly ships, needing to be close to your opponent's ships. That's all in the design of these Y-Wing parts, which is really good to see. Making them cheaper should hopefully get them to see more play, which should hopefully push those archetypes just a little bit more. Let's move down to the K-Wing. Miranda Doney no longer is the most expensive K-Wing. Asajj Tuketu is now the most expensive one. Still don't have any talents. In fact, let's just compare those costings on Miranda. So Miranda was a relative 58 points. Now she's only 48 points. And considering how her ability has taken a bit of a nerf, I think that's probably fair enough. I don't think we're going to see crazy Miranda builds anymore, but the fact that she is 10 points cheaper could see her getting play, but I just don't feel like that ability is going to be as relevant. The ability to fly away and turtle and regen all those shields can now no longer be achieved with Miranda, which is a good thing in my eyes. Now, Asajj, or however you pronounce it, gone from a relative 56 points to 50 points, and he's now the most expensive K-Wing. Look, he does play into the Rebel archetype of wanting to fly near friends and giving them some kind of bonus, so I can understand that. It does still seem a bit weird that he's the most expensive. I guess in playtesting he must have done well. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, if these archetypes do change and we are not dealing with the more oppressive stuff that happened in first edition, could be interesting, but yeah, we'll see what happens with that. That's very interesting. Moving on to the E-Wing, and let's just bring up Corran Horn here. Corran Horn previously costed a relative 70 points. Now he's 74 points. But it is worth noting that this platform has gotten a really, really nice boost to it. The action bar, the burn-in ability, the dial, it's all a big improvement. So I don't think 74 points is enough to stop Corran from seeing play. In fact, I honestly think it's probably fair enough. And even Gavin Darklighter at 6 points less than Corran Horn, I can see him getting play. Although his ability has not changed from first edition, where, well, his name was different, but the ability was the same. I still think it seems to play in with what the Rebellion wants to be doing. So even at 68 points, yeah, I think the E-Wing is still more relevant despite the fact it is a little bit more expensive. Okay, let's talk about the Hawk, because this is pretty serious. Jan Ors, the top pilot for the Rebellion, 42 points. Previously, 50 points. And the Hawk has gotten a serious upgrade. And Jan Ors herself is still really good and did see a bit of meta play in first edition with the Birds of Prey build alongside Rey. Now, obviously, she can't fly alongside Rey anymore, but there are other options that can do a very similar thing. I'm looking particularly at the YT2400, for example. Maybe have like a Dash Jan build. We'll go for 90s video game as a theme in your list. That could be pretty cool. Yeah, it just seems really, really good. Kyle Katarn and Rorkanet are sitting at the same points, despite the fact that Kyle Katarn has a lower initiative. Although I think, again, what I was talking about before with archetypes, Kyle Katarn seems to be doing more of what the Rebellion wants. The Rebel Scout is 32 points, which is the same as first edition. That has not changed. And overall, the points band is only 10 points from the Rebel Scout to Jan Ors. And that seems fair enough. I think there is a little bit of weight associated with initiative. On the Hawk, it has barrel roll now. Being able to fly later means you can line up the arc perfectly and deal with aces better. So it's not as weighted as other ships, but it's still only a 10-point band, which is not big. Let's move on to the RZ1 A-Wing. Again, big reductions in this one. Let's bring up Jake Farrell, for example. Was 48 points. Now is 40 points. He's an 8-point reduction on this platform. I will say he is initiative 4 and he cannot increase his initiative with upgrade cards, which is a big difference from first edition. But again, he has an ability which seems to really work well with the Rebellion. He helps friendly ships. rather than being internally synergistic, which is more about what the resistance was about based on what FFG have told us so far. I think 40 points is a very competitive cost for Jake Farrell. He might not fly the same as he did in first edition, but just seems good overall. Plus, all of the A-Wings basically have a sort of quasi-push the limits built into them where they can all do those red boosts after any action. So this seems like a very, very competitively costed platform. However, there is one key thing between this and the old A-Wing in that you cannot take multiple talents, and there is no way to take off the missile to reduce points, but it's already cheaper anyway, so that doesn't really matter. Arvel Crinid at 36 points, I think is really, really competitive. But I think both of those high-tier pilots are really good. None of them are really ace-like in the way they seem to want to fly, unless I'm mistaken. So we'll see what happens when the A-Wings re-release in second edition. Maybe we'll get some more ace-like pilots, but seems really good. Seems really, really good. Let's move on to the Sheetha P-Class shuttle. Fen Rao, very, very expensive. Where were you in first edition? 40 points up to 52 points. Ooh, that's a bit of an increase, guys. But look, let's be honest, Fen Rao is one of the most meta-defining pilots to come out of the last release, so yeah, I think this might just be fair enough. It means it's going to be harder to do like Fen Kanan, Fen Lothal Rebel, that kind of stuff, at least without all the upgrades and that kind of thing. A lot of the pieces that make that list good are kind of still there, although it's much harder to shoot twice with your Lothal Rebel now, so I don't think that's going to be a big thing in second edition. But yeah, wow. And despite the fact that Ezra Bridger has Force abilities, yeah, I think FFG just looked at Fen Rao and went, nah, we're not even going to risk it, guys. We're going to overcook this. And I think overall, my thoughts on that kind of approach is things that were really repressive in first edition, things that were really degenerative and sort of shut other things out. It's better to make those things less powerful than to play with fire and accidentally keep them being as powerful. Like we saw in first edition with the constant re-nerfing of the Jump Master. Do it once and do it right. If it's a bit overzealous, fine, we can creep the points back down later on, but yeah, Fen 52 points. I'm not going to complain. He was really annoying in first edition. And I think given this points ban, it's actually really cool to see Ezra Bridger at 42 points. Makes him a bit more relevant. Now, the Stress Ezra build is probably not going to exist in second edition because a lot of the key elements of that don't exist anymore. Yeah, we don't really have the gunner that can make him shoot the same target twice. We don't have R3A2. We don't have all that kind of stuff, which really pushes that over the top. Zeb Aurelius and AP5 both have talents. Okay, cool. AP5 at Initiative 1 with a talent. That's okay. I can't think of any way to break that, but it just seems surprising, that's all. Let's move on to the X-Wing. And sitting firmly on top, which is no surprise, is Luke Skywalker. Despite the fact that he is not the highest initiative, he has a Force slot and a very good application of the Force slot in instinctive aim. I am not surprised Luke's the most expensive. I don't think this is going to keep him out of seeing meta play. I think Luke alongside one big ship, maybe even like Dash Luke, I can see that being a thing. Again, you guys are going to brew, I'm going to brew, and we'll come up with this kind of stuff. But I'm very, very excited to play around with Luke Skywalker. I think it's going to be a very, very fun ship to build with indeed. Let's actually jump over to Wedge Antilles because he's going to give us a better indication of how they've adjusted the points on this platform. Previously, Wedge cost 58 points, and now he costs 52. Although there's no Renegade refit in second edition. Having said that, the dial's better, the flip card is better, so yeah, it almost feels like they've further decreased the points. If we were talking about what's going on with first edition and we applied Renegade refit to Wedge, he would be a relative 54 points. So only a slight extra decrease in the points. Plus, Wedge is one of the original parts on the X-Wing, so I think we can afford to knock him down a tier just to make him a bit more relevant. He's not really seeing all that much play in first edition right now, so that feels okay. Plus, with these X-Wing pilots, you notice that the upgrade slots do change. That is because of all of Saw Gerrera's Cavern Angels have illicit slots, which is really, really cool. Let's just do a bit of snooping here because I want to see if they've played around with the points cost to adjust for that. For example, we have Thane Kyrell, Colby Sperato, and Biggs all at the same cost. Now, Biggs is a bit of an outlier. Let's compare Thane at Initiative 5 to Colby Sperato, Initiative 4. Okay, so for example, Thane and Colby Sperato cost the same, but Thane Kyrell is a higher initiative, meaning that Colby Sperato is paying a little bit more to get that illicit slot. Now, what illicit slot's going to work great on the X-Wing? I don't know. Maybe Feedback Array? I can see X-Wings being really good blockers with all those boosts and barrel rolls. I don't know. It's something to play around with. Oh, also, speaking of Feedback Array, Cavern Angel Zealot is 41 points and does not have a talent. I was worried about this. I was pretty sure they weren't going to do that. But yeah, we're not getting the Initiative 1 with a talent in 2nd edition. That was just a fun thing to chuck in 1st edition when they released the last little bit. So that makes perfect sense. So in terms of costing, the X-Wing seems to have come down a smidge across the board. It's kept basically every part of the fix from 1st edition and then some. We keep the torpedoes on every platform, despite the fact that we basically get the costings relative to Renegade Refit. So yeah, X-Wing 2nd edition looks real legit. Let's move on. Let's talk about the TIE Fighter. Which is interesting because we don't currently have Sabine's Masterpiece, which means that this platform does not have access to a crew or an illicit. Now, Captain Rex, you've been made a bit expensive. Captain Rex, Initiative 2. All right, and we move over to Ezra. Ezra is Initiative 3, same as Sabine. Okay, so FFG have noticed that Captain Rex has a very powerful ability, and it's actually worth making him as expensive as the Force user to kind of counteract that. Now, some might say things like this in Fen Rao is a bit of an overzealous reaction to what was happening in 1st edition. Again, I think if FFG are going to do this right, they just have to be cautious with this kind of stuff. It doesn't matter if they make something too expensive. They can always reduce it later. Just make sure that the 2nd edition meta doesn't start off on a bad foot. I can understand the logic here. Also, Captain Rex does not have a talent, and Sabine does. Ezra has his Force ability, and Zeb has nothing because Zeb is terrible. Fair enough. Let's move on to the Ewing. Again, we're looking at a bunch of parts that have illicits and some that don't. Saw Gerrera. Saw Gerrera, you used to be 52 points. You are still 52 points. Makes perfect sense. What about Hef? Let's bring up one of the old pilots, for example. 48 points down to 45, so a slight decrease. Not a lot to talk about with the Ewing. The main thing here is we have illicit slots on Saw Gerrera's Cavern Angels. Probably the biggest thing here. The Two Tubes brothers, Benthic 2 Tube and Edrio 2 Tubes on the X-Wing do not get talents. That's fair enough. They're only Initiative 2. Apart from that, yeah. Talents across the board apart from the generics. Sounds good to me. Let's move on to the VCX 100. Kanan Jarrus is very expensive. Kanan, what did you used to cost? You used to cost 38, would be 76 points. Up to 90 points. Well, there we go. Yeah, look, Kanan Jarrus has a Force ability. That's pretty good. And he has a very relevant Force ability. A very good way to spend those tokens to reduce the dice on your opponent's attacks. Yeah, it's probably fair enough. Kanan was really good in 1st edition, so no complaints from me there. Hera has gotten a talent. So finally, we have a ghost with a talent slot. Previously, Hera cost a relative 80 points. Now she costs 76, so a point reduction, the same pilot ability, and a talent, which is really cool. Plus, the Ghost previously only had 2 crew slots. Now it has 2 crew slots and a gunner, which is really good. So you can combine your veteran turret gunner with whatever turret you want to take. You can take a veteran tail gunner, which is a relatively affordable thing, by the way. The Phantom docked with your Ghost actually gives you a rear-firing arc attack. And look, the Ghost is no longer firing with 2 TLT shots. It doesn't have that really just dumb, annoying thing anymore. But Veteran Tail Gunner, yeah, I can see a bit of potential there. Let's move on to the Millennium Falcon. Han Solo sitting at the top with 92 points. Previously was 92 points, so no change there. The ability feels a little bit more relevant. Being able to re-roll every dice, no matter what the effect, seems really good. I'm most interested in Lando, to be honest, on the Falcon. I know I've spoken about this before, but I am going to reiterate that because Lando looks awesome. Previously 88 points, he's gone up to 92. I don't think that matters. In fact, you can see here, FFG have gone, yeah, this new Lando ability is good, despite the fact he's a lower initiative than Han. We're going to make them cost the same thing. And the habit in first edition of having to make everything go up in points, it really bothered me, especially with really powerful pilot abilities. I don't think that has to be the case. And the new Lando is doing everything the Rebellion wants. And at 92 points, he costs a little bit more. I don't care. I still think the platform looks fantastic. So that's cool. No complaints from me. Moving on to the YT 2400, we have Dash at 100 points, previously 72 points. Now, don't freak out, guys, because what you have to remember about the YT 2400, it now basically has Outrider and Heavy Laser Cannon of old built into it. Plus, it can shoot at range 1. So, a massive points increase, which is completely fair enough. In fact, relatively speaking, if we were going to adjust those points, we would have Dash seating 48 points, 96 points. Yeah, it would be 96 points in first edition if we added all that stuff in. Plus, he can shoot at range 1. I think only another 4 points is very, very good for this platform. It almost feels like a point reduction, if I'm to be honest. And the fact of the matter is we don't have Heavy Laser Cannon that just shoots in a big range 2 to 3 thing. It's now in the Bullseye firing arc. The YT 2400 looks pretty legit. I don't think that 100 point thing is going to be enough to sort of keep it out of meta play. I think this is going to be pretty legitimate. And as I was saying before, I'm particularly looking at Luke Skywalker alongside Dash Rendar. In my mind, those points just seem to match up quite nicely. Very curious to see what happens with this one. Not giving it the option to take a reduced cannon slot, like you could always put the Mangler cannon on in first edition. Now it basically has a HLC burnt into it, and you are paying for that. Nonetheless, it's going to be very, very explosive. YT 2400, look out for it, for sure. Alright, last but not least, we have the Z95 Headhunter. Iron Kraken moving from 38 points to 36 points. Not much to say there. The Bandit Squadron Pilot... Oh, Bandit Squadron Pilot is now the cheapest pilot in the game, in case you guys missed that. The Academy Pilot is 24 points. The Binyari Pirate is 24 points. Bandit Squadron Pilot without an illicit slot is now 1 point cheaper than the TIE Fighter. Righto, okay. Interesting. Now, this doesn't mean that you can field more of them. You can still only field a max of 8 of these guys. But if you do that, you field 8 of them, you have a total of, what would it be, 16 points spare? Maybe we can chuck on a few modifications or something like that. Maybe the Z95 is the swarm ship now. I'll have to see what happens when we do a bit of brewing for that. Alright, moving on to the Rebel unique upgrades. Chopper is now gone from 0 points to 2 points. Yep, feels fair enough. Regen is very, very explosive. R2-D2 and R5-D8, 8 points and 7 points respectively. They were always sitting around this kind of points. We're putting a little bit more weight into regen, making sure we have to spend actions, all that kind of stuff. It pretty much is in keeping with everything we're seeing in second edition. Our configurations are 0, just like they used to be. Zeb has gone from 0 to 1 point. Chopper has gone from 0 to 2 points. Baze Malbus's design has completely changed. He's all about netting focus tokens now, so there's no point comparing him to the old version. Now, C-3PO. Guys, this is why you don't believe rumours. Because back when we had the UK Expo and people were talking about Luke Skywalker and they were demoing him and he cost, 30 points, there was this rumour going around that 3PO was also 30 points. And I never confirm anything on the channel without knowing about it. And I just thought that doesn't seem right that 3PO is 30 points. He's not, he's 12 points, and that is fair enough. He now no longer does the whole you can get 0 thing, but he does give you a calculate action and he does net you 2 tokens whenever you take it. 12 points seems like a lot, but at the same time, I think this design is very, very powerful, and I don't think this is going to hurt him. I think there are going to be plenty of scenarios where 3PO is worth taking. Let's just have a look at some of these bigger anomalies. Jyn Erso, only 2 points. That feels really good. Kanan Jarrus at 14 points. Let's just remind myself what Kanan Jarrus does. Kanan Jarrus, after a friendly ship at range 0 to 2, fully executes a white maneuver. You may spend 1 force to remove 1 stress token from that ship. Okay, it's very similar to the old effect. which even for 3 points was very, very good. We're not getting too much stress agnostic builds in second edition. The ability to do what Kanan did in first edition, especially with things like the new Millennium Falcon title, all that kind of things. A lot of really dumb, broken stuff that Kanan could do. 14 points, yes, is very expensive. But also remember, he gives the ship he's on a force token, and that is powerful unto itself. So, yep, that seems alright. Lando is 5 points, but Lando's had an upgrade to his ability where if you blank out, you do get some value. Leia is 8 points. Leia was previously 4 points. And the main difference is Leia can be used repeatedly. Not 2 turns in a row, but I think you're probably not going to have to rely on that anyway. I do like to look at Princess Leia in second edition. Looks really, really good. Now, Maul. Maul is 13 points, and Maul is the subject of a bit of contention because Maul, it would appear, is not even available in the Rebel pack. But I will say at 13 points, he doesn't really have any use on the Rebel faction just yet. My hope with what's going on with FFG here is when we get Dark Side Force upgrades, we get Maul in a pack, specifically in a Rebel pack for the Rebel faction, and that kind of negates the need for Rebel players to buy the Scum pack or whatever. Because for 13 points right now, that ability is not worth it, without also having access to those Dark Side Force abilities, which I'm assuming when those come out, they'll be quite powerful. Saw Gerrera is 8 points. Okay, good. Good. Saw Gerrera was 1 point in first edition. That was, I'm guessing, a reaction to what's going on in first edition. We have very powerful things. Sometimes they only cost 1 point. Saw Gerrera has a very explosive ability. In second edition, there's far fewer ways to capitalize off it. I don't care. I still think there's enough value to be had out of ships that just throw a lot of dice. We could still think about putting him on a YT2400, and I still think this ability is going to be good. But for 8 points, you'll think twice. You will consider other options that may be a little bit more powerful for a cheaper cost. Okay, moving on to these gunners. Yes, Luke Skywalker is 30 points. Thank the maker. What's really cool is these other guys are actually cheaper than I thought they were going to be. Bistan at 14 points in particular isn't even as expensive as Ezra Bridger. Now, Ezra gives you a Force token, so I can understand that. But he's only a little bit more expensive than Han Solo, and I think Bistan, out of all of these gunner cards, is one to seriously look at. The fact that you have a great answer against Swarmbat hitting 2 ships inside the same arc seems very, very powerful. Also, you can fire at 2 ships, one out one side, one out the other. It doesn't matter as long as the target's different. And I think Bistan offers you the most flexibility out of any of these gunner cards. Han Solo is just a bit of an upgrade on the veteran turret gunner, but he is 4 more points as well, so I don't know whether that's going to be really relevant. It might be a case of downgrading Han Solo to a veteran turret gunner is one of the most common things we do to fit things in lists. Being able to shoot Initiative 7 seems good in some situations, but just seems useless in a lot of situations, so I don't know. We'll see how we go. The Selfless talent is 3 points. Yep, fair enough. Only a slight increase on what it was in first edition. The Phantom title is 2 points as opposed to 0 points, so you've got to pay a little bit to make sure you can get those rear shots or the coordinate or whatever. Makes perfect sense. Millennium Falcon is 6 points. Seems a bit harsh, but you get an extra defensive ability, which is always a good thing. Moldy Crow is 12 points. Yeah, fair enough. The title looks really, really good. I'm not going to complain about that. It means basically the one hawk you have with Moldy Crow is going to be extra powerful. Hawks in a swarm, so like a 4 of hawk list, which you can probably still do in second edition, just isn't going to have that much firepower. They no longer have turret upgrades, so you can't do like 4 TLTs and that kind of thing. It basically means if you want attack efficiency out of hawks, you can basically only field 1, while the rest have to be in support. Could still be interesting, but yeah, not the super explosive ship which you can put 4 TLTs on. It's more about just having one really powerful platform, which makes sense. Ghost is 0, doesn't matter. You're only paying for the Phantom title anyway. And Outrider is 14 points. Ooh, wow, okay. So Outrider at 14 points. This to me really pushes the points cost of the platform. On Dash Render, it starts at 114 points. If we're thinking about first edition, that's like 62 points. Without any other upgrades. Now, sure, it's like having a heavy laser cannon built into your ship already. But yeah, Outrider, interesting. Look, I'm not a Rebel expert. Some of you guys out there are much better at building with this ship than I am. So please, in the comment section, tell me what you do with this Outrider, what you do with the 2400 in general. Very curious, whether we can fit Dash with the title alongside Luke. What would Luke take? I don't know, all kinds of things. But guys, I have been recording for half an hour and I've only got through one of these 4 sheets. So I'm going to have to stop there. I'm going to have to record more of these and make separate videos, but that's okay. I'm having a lot of fun going through this. In the meantime, guys, stay tuned for the rest of these. Lots more to talk about. Like and subscribe. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter and Reddit, and I will catch you guys later.